I think that's the main concern right now because an Israeli official or source told CNN that the United States is seriously considering removing sanctions on Iran, and Israel is concerned about it.
We have no choice. Well, I love that. They're seriously. It's one of the demands that Iran's put down for conflict termination. Iran's not walking away with sanctions in place. That's not going to. And remember, it's not like, Scott Bessent sitting there in his little desk going, sanction them, and there's no repercussions to America. Iran's got the world by the throat, choking the world off. So the United States can't sit there and say, well, we're going to delay. We have to make a decision. We have to make a decision soon. And so, this is where I think Iran, has. I love that meme they put out. Donald Trump, America's holding all the cards. And so the Iranians show Donald Trump and a handful of, but it's Uno cards where holding the cards is a bad thing. And the Iranians are sitting there with a smaller hand with all the good cards going, yeah. But that's the truth. The Iranians have the advantage here. We proved Operation Freedom can't do anything. Do you understand how humiliating it is that we went to war against ourselves? That means we panicked. It means we have no impact. We have no ability to project power in there. The red, white, and blue shield that we put over the Strait of Hormuz was fictional, just like everything else we do is fictional. So the United States is going to lift sanctions. And I think that's one of the things the Russians are telling them, the Chinese are telling them, that there can be no peace without the lifting of sanctions. Now, the United States is going to, we always play stupid games. And so we'll say, well, there are certain sanctions that are in play that are linked to, terrorism. And if Iran continues to support Hezbollah and the Houthi, then they're supporting terrorist entities, and therefore these sanctions will stay in place. That's a bold statement to make while you're being choked off. So we'll see how long that lasts. I have a feeling that the Russians and the Chinese are saying, no, it must be comprehensive, that all laws, all it's going to be tough for the United States, but at a minimum, all international sanctions, United Nations sanctions, have to be lifted. And the United States needs to lift sanctions that are attached to the nuclear program, ballistic missiles. The terrorism aspect of it, you need congressional consent. And so here we have an issue right now because a lot of Republicans aren't inclined to support, the total lifting of sanctions. And even if they were, the Democrats could drag this thing out until November, and then, we have a different reality. So that's one of the areas I think Iran is going to have to be frustrated with, because there's certain political realities at play that aren't conducive to the total lifting of sanctions, no matter how justified that is. You've got to be realistic. But the most important thing is the lifting of international sanctions. China's already shown that American secondary sanctions no longer frighten anybody. They've just told the United States, pound sand. If you sanction us, we sanction you back, and it's total economic war, and you can't win. And that's the truth. So Iran, I think gets by having international sanctions lifted, then diving into the SCO, diving into BRICS, and just hugging them so tight that the United States will never be able to separate them with any domestic legislation, and the Russians and Chinese will never again allow the United Nations to impose Security Council mandated sanctions. I think that's the future of Iran. It's a good future, by the way. I personally, you and I have had this talk before. I think that's the future for Iran. I think the future isn't militancy, isn't aggression. I think the future is, a decisive pivot to the East. Now, your president's going to have to stop being in love with the West, and your foreign minister is going to have to stop being in love with the West. And a lot of Iranians are going to have to start falling out of love with the West. I don't mean to hate us, but we're not the solution. We're the problem, especially as long as you have Europe the way it is and the United States the way it is. It's fanciful thinking to imagine in the near future a United States willing to do trade with Iran on an equitable basis. You can't trust us. We're liars. We lie about everything. We can't be trusted. And Europe's the same way. They're dysfunctional liars. The people that have been upfront and honest with the Iranians over time, especially recently, are the Russians and the Chinese. And I am continually flabbergasted that there's still an element within Iran. And I understand it because there's a significant Iranian diaspora here in the West, a lot of connectivity back and forth. But at some point in time, you know, even the Iranian diaspora has to recognize that if you truly love Iran, the solution isn't anything imposed by the West. The solution is Iran pivoting to the global economic future of the world, which is in Asia.
Scott, do you see any sort of false flag operation to sabotage everything? Because we had Naftali Bennett 2 days ago arguing that if the United States leaves the region, that's going to bring a new 9/11 to the United States. And
I don't see that. No, I don't see it at all. There may be an attempt, but the idea that that's going to trigger a repeat of a failed legacy. I mean, I know the United States is insane, and Albert Einstein once, or at least been attributed to him, said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So we had a 9/11 that got us involved in 20 years of global war on terrorism that we lost, straight up lost. I know we killed a 57-year-old diabetic. Yay, SEAL Team 6. You guys are so good. You rock, baby. And we got Saddam Hussein hung by the neck until dead, even though he had nothing to do with 9/11. But we just were humiliated in August of 2021 with the final withdrawal from Afghanistan. And the idea that we've now just lost a war with Iran and we're going to be sucked back in because of some false flag attack, I don't see it. I don't see anybody falling for that.
How do you see, Scott, the future of the United States foreign policy when it comes to Israel and what Israel wants from the United States, which we know that these endless wars, they literally want the United States to fight each and every war in the Middle East and in the region for them. And it seems to me that Donald Trump is just the peak of what could have happened, and it's not going to be the same way as it was, as we've been witnessing with the Trump administration as time goes by in the United States.
Donald Trump's a political animal, and the game is survival. And he needed Miriam Adelson to get elected, so he took her $200 million bribe. And he staffed his team with all the people that Miriam Adelson liked, especially Marco Rubio, and Secretary of State. She wanted him to be vice president. And this team, this golden team of Zionists, have humiliated Donald Trump, humiliated him. And this is a man who, is vindictive as the day is long. If his political legacy is on the line, and the threat that exists that can, destroy this legacy comes from this very Zionistic enterprise that he has empowered with Miriam Adelson's money, he'll drop that in a heartbeat. There is no loyalty in Donald Trump, none whatsoever. He has no obligations. It's all about power. And I think you'll see that he's going to divorce himself from the Zionists as quick as possible. And anybody who peeps gets fired. Heads will roll because of this war. Just people need to understand that. And it won't be Donald Trump's head. He's going to take, Pete Hegseth is dead man walking. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen soon because the man's just an embarrassment. You saw his testimony before the United States Congress. The guy is, hyped up on, some sort of testosterone-induced cocaine substitute. How dare he speak to the United States Senate in the way he did? I wish I had been a senator because I would have leaped out of the seats and punched him dead in front of the world. I'd go to jail for that gladly because he's a disgrace, this Secretary of War. Why? He doesn't have a right. He works for the American people, and he's up there arrogantly defending illegalities and he's not smart. He's just not a smart person at all. So his head will roll. I think Donald Trump's going to get rid of him as fast as possible. This will be Pete Hegseth's failure. Marco Rubio is a more difficult, aspect. he's a combined national security advisor, secretary of state. It might be time to pull Rubio in, and relieve him of his national security advisor status, bring in somebody new, and leave Rubio with the Secretary of State, because I think that the dual-hatted also helped get us involved in this war. Scott Bessent, again, is a man who's just brought economic catastrophe. And he's also alienated the United States with China. And it may, we'll see if Trump does have this meeting with Xi Jinping. I don't think Bessent comes out of this meeting looking very well. I think he's a humiliation to the United States. He's a detriment to Donald Trump's legacy. And we may see his head roll too. And now suddenly you're sort of in a Zionist-free zone. You've created a Zionist-free vacuum. And if you staff it with the right people, you're no longer doing Israel's bidding. And I think that's the direction we're heading. Donald Trump is a political animal. 60% of the United States population today views Israel as bad juju. 59% view Netanyahu as bad juju. These are unprecedented numbers. And it's only going to get worse. The American people, unfortunately, we don't have a moral compass. I thought we did, but we don't, because we allowed genocide to take place and we allowed this illegal war of aggression to take place. The people aren't against the Iran war because it was the wrong thing to do or it was against the law. They're against it because we lost, and they're feeling the price of the pinch at the pump. Bill Clinton knew this. That's why on his war room in 1992, they had the sticker, "It's the economy, stupid." It is or 1991. It is the economy, stupid. 92, I guess. Got to remember which election year cycle. But that's what wakes America up. We don't have a moral compass. We just understand when it pinches us in the pocketbook. And right now, Israel is pinching us in the pocketbook. And so, goodbye, Israel. And I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a decoupling of the United States from Israel. I don't know how is this sustainable, because now it comes down to a question of how quick Israel collapses. I do think that Israel is going to be experiencing extreme economic difficulty in the not so distant future. And it's going to be so extreme as to promote depopulation. And as people flee Israel and go back to where they belong, which isn't Israel, it demographically becomes almost impossible to sustain the notion of a Jewish homeland. So, that's what I think is the direction we're heading with Israel.
Scott, we had two administrations, the Biden administration forcing Russia to react, to somehow start a new war with the case of Ukraine. And again, the Trump administration doing the same, forcing Iran. Because we know, by the way, the two countries were trying so hard with Russia in 2021, December 2021, trying to do everything to negotiate with the United States and NATO. And we had the same case with the Iranian case. They were negotiating 2 times while the United States was, somehow, preparing behind the scene to attack, to do a surprise attack. The two countries were forced into these new positions that they're in. And is that going to happen with the case of China as well? Because we had some sort of tariffs on China, but militarily, is that going to happen again?
We have no military power. What are you talking about? What do we got? We had theory. We had the theory that we were the most powerful blue water navy in the world. We had theory that our aircraft carriers would be able to project power in a way that could intimidate China, or the U.S. Air Force could do the same. What the Chinese now know is that the U.S. Navy is a paper tiger. It'll get sunk before it gets anywhere near the Chinese coast, and there's nothing the United States can do to stop that from happening. And they also now know that the air defense umbrella that's currently postured over Taiwan won't work, and that all they have to do is take the Iranian game plan, saturate it with drones on day one, and the Chinese have a whole bunch of drones. Watch the depletion and come in with their sophisticated ballistic missiles, and in 3 days, Taiwan is destroyed. That's the reality right now. And so the United States isn't going to militarily intimidate China. The other reality is that China can shut down the South China Sea and choke off Japan and South Korea at will now. It's no longer a theoretical capacity. We now know the United States has no ability whatsoever to seize control of the South China Seas from China. We also know that China can use proxies to shut down the Strait of Malacca, perhaps Indonesian proxies, another choke point. We're seeing literally the end of an empire, the American empire. The American empire was premised on control of the seas. Our blue water navy, we were everywhere. We can't control anything, and we just proved it. I mean, that's why this Operation Freedom Defeat is such a big deal, because it proves the United States is just as impotent as the day is long. So I don't think we have the same thing. And now we get back to Russia. The thing about Russia that people need to understand is that Vladimir Putin's been playing, in my mind, a brilliant game that happened because he made a mistake. He didn't make a mistake going into Ukraine. The special military operation, he had no choice. He was given no choice. The mistake was believing that Ukraine was agreement capable, because the whole premise of the special military operation was to get Ukraine to the negotiating table quickly. It wasn't to take Kiev. It wasn't to do any of that stuff. It was to put pressure on Ukraine to have a negotiated it. And we saw that immediately after the conflict started. They began negotiating in Gomel in Belarus. After 3 or 4 rounds there, they ran off to Turkey. And within a month or so, they had an agreement. And that would have been the end of it. That would have been a great Russian victory to get the agreement they wanted. But NATO, the United States, and Ukraine turned out to be agreement incapable. And so the war escalated, and Russia's been dealing with that escalation. People forget that when they started the special military operation, the Russians weren't looking at a long-term conflict. And so when you speak about an economic plan to deal with sanctions, they had a plan, but Putin wasn't sure if that plan would work. I mean, people were like, why didn't he mobilize early on? Well, gosh, I don't know why. Because you didn't know if your economy was going to be going through, not just recession, but perhaps depression because of sanctions. There was talk about 20%, constriction of Russia's economy. It turned out to be single digit. And then Russia turned right around and started having a growing economy. But Putin has been managing things. If Putin came in hard, China may have found itself in a little bit more difficult position politically to support that. Putin had to play a game that was premised on, that this wasn't a war, that it was a special military operation linked to legitimacies found under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter in terms of collective self-defense, preemptive in nature, all of which are cognizable claims. The Russians have law on their side, even though the West doesn't like to acknowledge it. But he's had to manage this. He had to manage then the game-changing event where the United States and Western Europe, rather than acknowledging that Russia defeated the Ukrainians and pushing for, a closure through a peace treaty, doubled down and started new lend-lease and started injecting tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of military aid. And Russia found itself in a proxy conflict with the collective West. Now, how do you manage that? The first thing Russia had to do is take care of its strategic base. All these people, again, are out there. Russia needed to do this, that, and the other thing. I don't know. Maybe what Russia needed to do is expand their military from 900,000 to 1.6 million so that the other fronts were now taken care of as you draw down resources to the special military operation. So they rebuilt their military, which means they needed to activate defense industry. They're not just applying a war. They're in the process of equipping hundreds of thousands of troops that are brought into existence, new military formations. And they've done this. It's been ignored in the West, but they've done it. And now they've taken it up. I think they're going to 2.2 million, expanding even more. Why? Because if you're going to fight the West, you need to have the capacity to do it. They don't want to fight the West. They've avoided this. I think they're getting ready to fight the West. This is the fatal mistake, because as Russia's gotten stronger, Europe's gotten weaker. The Germans are indicative of this. 111 billion euros were allocated for defense military rehabilitation. The Germans don't even know where it went. But it went into a money pit, and the German army's weaker today than they were before they got that money. It's amazing how weak the Germans are. The French are weak. All of Europe's weak. They've got no military capacity at all, and yet they're sitting there flexing muscles that are premised on the notion of America backing them up. Well, that's over thanks to Iran. So now the United States, is in a position where at best they're neutral about Europe, and at worst they're turning their backs on Europe. At the same time that Europe continues to play the escalation game, you have Britain and Germany building drones on behalf of Ukraine, giving them to the Ukrainians so they can strike targets in the Russian strategic depth. You now have Poland and the Baltic nations providing a corridor through their territory so that drones can get to St. Petersburg. You have the same thing happening where drones are transiting Kazakhstan to get into the Russian strategic depth. And they're starting to have an impact on Russia's energy sector. I mean, a strategic impact on Russia's energy sector. This is unsustainable. And so Russia now is going to be compelled to take action. It will be decisive in nature when it occurs. It will not be, giving Europe a chance to match escalation with escalation. They will come in hard. And I think the first thing they're going to do is take out Kiev. Unprecedented, the Russian military said, evacuate the city. If you remember, when the Russians unveiled the Oreshnik missile, they said, this missile is horrible. And if we use it, it'll take, have the equivalent of a nuclear weapon in terms of the devastation that'll occur. But the Russians said, we would obviously give civilian populations advance notice. And they never did, because they never used it against. The Ministry of Defense come out. They didn't say you should think about. They said evacuate. Evacuate. No options. All civilians must evacuate. All diplomatic staff must evacuate. Because if the Ukrainians attack us, we're going to take out Kiev with ballistic missiles. I think we're going to find that Russia has missiles besides Oreshnik, and it's going to be absolutely devastating for Ukraine. But that's what needs to be done. On the battlefield, the Ukrainians, people don't think about how these things happen. But the Ukrainians, of course, now have almost exclusively focused their mobilization on creating drone units. So they want to bring in women for drone units and all this stuff. Where are they getting their drones? These first-person view drones. They're making them at home now, but they're not making them in big factories. What the Ukrainians have done is they've taken these components, and housewives are building components. And so they've taken drone manufacturing and they've put it throughout the civilian infrastructure. And as a result, they're able to produce, tens of thousands of drones in a day. And so now these new drone units come in, and they've changed the reality of the battlefield. Russia's still advancing, but it's slower. There's the concept of maneuver warfare. You're not maneuvering anywhere with that many drones. Now, Russia has a counter for it. They've created a unit called Rubicon. And Rubicon, I think they were 5,000, might be 15,000 strong now. Specialist counter drone capability. So when the Ukrainians seek to, overlay their new drone capacity on the battlefield to change the dynamic, Rubicon comes in and starts killing everybody. And eventually they drive them back. But in the meantime, they've made life hell for Russian soldiers. The Russians can't have the amount of maneuver capacity up front because the drones are taking it out. So the Russians are compelled to thin their lines. They have a handful of men at the front line who are able to hide and avoid these drones, but that creates opportunities for Ukrainians to counterattack. And so they counterattack, they seize some territory that's designed to be seized. The Russians built this in. Then the Russians bring in Rubicon and their own maneuver capability and push the Ukrainians back and kill a lot of people. But it's created a different dynamic that people in the West are saying, oh, the Ukrainians have fought the Russians to a standstill. No, they haven't, because they're losing men at an unsustainable level. But, we've got this taking place. The Russians now recognize, again, one of the things that Vladimir Putin has avoided is taking casualties. But I think the Russians will recognize that at the moment you decapitate Ukrainian leadership, you have to come in and go for the kill on the battlefield. And I think you're going to see the kind of decisive push that hasn't happened because the Russians are going to be willing to absorb the casualties to break through the drone zone and then kill everybody. So I think, we're looking at a very decisive summer coming up, the summer of 2026, and that the United States is going to let this happen because the United States blames Zelensky for the deadlock. And the United States is also embittered about Europe and how they've sustained a war and prevented peace from happening. So I think we're at a state right now that the United States will acknowledge that Europe has, become involved in this conflict to an extent that's unjustifiable, and that Russia has every right to defend itself. And the United States will give Russia a window of opportunity to inflict maximum damage and bring an end to this conflict. It won't be the United States working with Europe to come up with a deal that puts Russia in a bad place. It'll be the strategic defeat of Europe and Ukraine, and the United States sitting back there going, you brought it on yourselves. The war needs to end on terms acceptable to Russia. And in exchange for that, Russia will help bring an end to the conflict with Iran. I think Russia will play a very important role in the nuclear side, but also in the finance side, the lifting of sanctions, because Russia will offer Iran incentives not to insist on, the United States rewriting this legal code, because that's not going to happen.
So do you see at the end of the war in Ukraine, are they going to have Odessa or they're going to lose Odessa? Ukrainians, I'm talking about. Because it's so important.
It's a tough one because emotionally, I think the Russians won Odessa. Emotionally, strategically, it depends. It depends what happens. Look, we'll know in a couple of days. We'll know on May 10th or 11th if Ukraine exists as a modern nation state. As I said, I pray that they attack Russia on May 9th. I pray they do, because that solves everything. Because I think people in Europe are thinking Russia's bluffing. I don't think Russia's bluffing. And I think that'll be the end of Zelensky, the end of the Ukrainian government. And the attack will be so devastating, it'll break the will of Ukraine to fight. And when that happens, you'll see a collapse at the front. And if Russia has indeed created the reserves that some people say, there may be the ability to exploit that collapse and make a push and resolve the Odessa issue. You can resolve Odessa not by seizing the city, but by surrounding the city, cutting the city off, and then as part of the peace is that Russia has given the city. I don't know. I don't know how this is going to play out because it's a problem fraught with political consequence. It depends on how successful Russia is in this potential push. But I say friends. I'm friendly with. I can say friends with Andrei Yelnitsky. I like the guy, and I think he likes me, so we can call ourselves friends. Sergei Karaganov, we've met and talked. I respect him. I don't know if I'm up in his friend. I don't think I'm in his circle of trust yet, but I listen to the guy, and he's influential. These people have always had a relatively hard line, but it's always been a hard line tempered by political reality. But I think there's a growing recognition that the political reality has changed. You can no longer talk about Russian-European relations using data that's 2 years old. And that's what everybody, including myself, has been doing. I've been, talking about, how Russia relates with Europe and NATO using, 2024 as the benchmark. Things have changed strategically. The harm that's being done to the Russian economy by Ukrainian long-range drone strikes has liberated the Pentagon in many ways, because again, a lot of decisions aren't made because there's alternatives, at least in theory. There are no alternatives now. For this to continue will bring about, potentially fatal harm to Russia. So Russia has no choice. And Karaganov is talking about that. So I honestly believe that we're going to see some very decisive action very soon. Russia's been preparing for this. And when it happens, it will shock the hell out of everybody. It will be shocking what happens to Kiev It'll be shocking what happens to some European targets as well. Pro hint, if you're producing drone parts for the Flamingo 5, you might want to not show up for work ever again, because that factory is probably going to disappear. Whether that factory is in the United Kingdom, in Denmark, in Germany, it's going to go, as it should. I mean, and then Russia's going to dare Europe to do anything about it. And Russia, believe me, if they make this decision, then Russia's ready to take it to the next level. Europe's not. I don't think Europe's ready to commit nuclear suicide. But when you confront Russia with crises of existential proportions, Russia will respond accordingly. And that's the stupidity of what the Ukrainians and their British and German allies have been doing, not recognizing the reality of Ukraine's inevitable defeat, trying to create a situation that gives them temporary propaganda points. We're hurting the Russians. Yes, you are. And now you're going to find out what happens when you hurt the Russians. And it'll be fatal for Ukraine. I'm not unhappy about that. I'm sorry for the Ukrainian people, but hey, we're 4+ years into a war that you're governed by Banderas, Ukrainian Nazi thugs, and you're doing nothing about it. You're watching your men get dragged off, and you're doing nothing about it. You don't have the gumption to rise up and take matters into your own hands. So you have lost the right to exist as a modern nation state. And so Russia will terminate Ukraine. I personally believe that is what's going to happen. It will be the war that had Russia fought it, because maybe I'm overly sensitive to this, but everybody's like, Scott, you said the war was going to be over in a week. It would have been had Russia gone to war. That's what everybody forgets. Russia didn't go to war. I thought they were going to war. Did you think they were going to war? I think most people thought they were going to war. When they came across, we're like, that's a lot of tanks. Russia's going to war. But they weren't. It was a special military operation, which confused us because we had never heard that term before. I've been studying Russian military art forever. I didn't know what a special military operation was. I found out. And then you realize the genius of what the Russians were doing, trying to get them to the negotiating table, and you realized it was working. So their plan worked. What they didn't factor in to account was the fact that the West is agreement incapable. And the West was seeking the permanent demise of Russia. You had, remember, Lloyd Austin. We want to destroy Russia. Biden, kill Putin. It took Russia, because those were statements made in the summer of 2022. It's taken Russia 4 years to finally recognize that those threats were serious. And that's the ultimate objective of Europe, is to kill Russia. So now that you've told Russia you want to kill them, don't be surprised when Russia kills you first. And I think that's the direction we're heading.
Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Thank you. And if I could just make a quick statement.
Go ahead.
As I said, a lot of analysis that's going on today about Russia is founded in data that's more than 2 years old. In 2023, 2024, I took some very serious trips into Russia where I visited 16 cities. I didn't just simply go to Moscow and St. Petersburg. I went everywhere, including the special military operation. And, I got to interview 3 of the 5 governors that are involved in this, and meet military leaders and meet the people and talk. And that shaped my perception of Russian reality. Yes, I've gone back 4 times since then, but those trips have been limited to Moscow and St. Petersburg, and you get caught up in the political bubble of those 2 cities. It's time to go and refresh the database. And I will be going back to Russia for a significant trip to refresh the database, and so that I can update the Russian reality, not just for myself, but for you. Wouldn't you like it if I came on and talked to you that I was not relying on a 2024 database, but I was going with a 2026 database? And so if people think there's value to this, understand I'm an independent journalist. I can only do this with the support of you. Go to scottritter.com. It's my website. You get to the Substack. The Substack's free, by the way. You can subscribe for free and gain access to everything. But if you subscribe to the Substack, you're paying my salary. That means that you're paying the electric bill here. You're putting a roof over my head. You're paying for the food that feeds my dog so they can bark in the middle of a podcast. That's the salary aspect of it. The trips are funded by donations, and there's a donation button there. And the trips only happen if people go and donate. And this is a substantial trip that is. I pay for everything. I pay for airfare. I pay for hotels. I pay for food. I pay for car transportation in country. I pay for the studios, the videographers, the sound technicians, the interpreters, the producers, the editors. I pay for it all because when you have 40 FBI agents kick down your door and come in your house and accuse you of being a Russian agent, you can't give them any opportunity to say, oh, you've taken something from the Russians. There's a lot of people out there saying I'm Putin's puppet. Far from it. Totally self-financed or totally financed with the donations that people provide. So I would just ask it if you could support this, it would be very helpful. The trip's going to happen, but the trip gets enhanced with the more I'm able to do, the more enhanced the trip is. And when I say do, remember, if I want to interview some people that are relevant, I need a studio. Because I don't use other people's studios. I need to rent a studio. They're expensive. I need to hire interpreters and the whole technical team. So I have a number of people I want to interview. I have places I want to go. Some of these places will require security. Got to pay for that. Because if it's given, then the people say, oh, well, you're receiving. So that's what I would ask. The other thing is this Iran war is going to end. And I'm going to Iran, just to let you know. It's going to happen. Again, though, I have to be careful about going to Iran, and the perception of being a tool of the Iranian government. I mean, once you're in Iran, you are, of course, hostage to the whim of the Iranian government. You only get to go where they want you to go. I'm hoping that they'll like the plan that I put forward and allow me to do some or most of what I wanted to do. But I have to pay for everything. Because otherwise I'm just a tool of the Iranian government. And I'll get 40 more FBI agents into my home. So your donations are not just funding a Russian trip, but are also creating the potential for an Iranian trip sometime in the near future. Again, this war has to end. I can't go over there while my country is in a state of war. But once this war ends, it's imperative that the Iranian reality be captured. And as you know, Iran's transformed itself dramatically in the last couple of months. Whatever you thought you knew about Iran, you don't know about anymore. It's a new country. It's a new reality that needs to be captured and understood. And so any support that people provide. And then lastly, support all your independent journalists. Support NEMA by hitting the like button or hitting whatever button, by donating. That's the only way this happens. This interview wouldn't happen unless he was here doing it, and he can't do it unless you help sustain it. It's the same thing for all the other independent journalists out there. This is an important time. We just spent better part of an hour and 11 minutes talking about issues that you're in a way that you're not going to hear it on mainstream media. They just don't talk about it. You get lied to on mainstream media. You don't have to agree with me, but at least understand that the discussion Neem and I are having generate debate, dialogue, and discussion. We're injecting new concepts in there for people to chew on. Broaden your horizons, broaden your perspectives. This doesn't happen free. There are no corporate sponsors out there underwriting this. It only is underwritten by the support of you, the audience. So I would just make the pitch also to support NEMA, support all the other independent actors out there, because now more than ever, we need this. This is information is power. And if you're prisoner to information provided by corporate media, you're sort of held hostage.
Yeah. Just to mention, because many of our audience are asking how they can help you. Here is in the scottritter.com, you see the donation tab. You can go and donate there, or you can subscribe to his Substack. And this is the way to help Scott Ritter.
Yeah. And you also help Honest by watching and helping NEMA. I mean, I'm here today talking because you exist. Otherwise, I'd be speaking into a black hole. So they need to support you as well. You support me by supporting you. You support him by supporting me. That's the beauty of this. we've talked for some time now about the family of podcasts, because there's a tight little group of people that, that move around: Judge Napolitano, Danny Haiphong, Garland Nixon, and others. And we all contribute in our own way. Danny Davis is out there. Support these people. Support these people. Keep them functioning, because we need it. We shouldn't just be viable during conflict. People need to understand that when nations are at war, that means that everybody failed. That means that humanity failed. We are viable when, through our dialogue, we can prevent wars, we prevent conflicts, and we can only prevent conflicts if we can convince enough people that war isn't necessary. And so even though the conflict's coming to an end, that doesn't mean that you wipe your brow and say, boy, we dodged that bullet. No, there's another conflict on the horizon that needs to be stopped through dialogue. That's why I like the name of your program. Dialogue works, but it does. Dialogue is great. And so, anyways, I think I'm on repetitive mode right now. But none of this happens without the support of the audience. That's the bottom line. Yeah.